getting settled, I will go ahead and introduce our moderator, and then she's going to be doing the introductions for the rest of the panel. But our moderator is there on the far end of the panel. Her name is Susan Hildreth. She lives in Walnut Creek and has been a Rossmore resident since 2015. She's the chair of the Library Foundation of Contra Costa and a member of the Contra Costa County Library Commission, representing Supervisorial District Number 2. She's a member of the Diablo Valley League of Women Voters and the Danville, Alamo, Walnut Creek American Association of University Women, also known as AAUW. She led the Federal Institute of Museum and Library Services from 2011 through 2015 and held library leadership positions including California State Librarian and City Librarian for the Seattle and the San Francisco Public Libraries. And with that, I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thank you, Lori, very much. Well, before I do some quick introductions of the panel, I just want to reflect on what a moving film that is. And this is the second time I've watched it, and a couple things have changed since I watched it, and I just wanted to bring you quickly some what I think is good news and some bad news. So good news, if you happen to notice toward the end of the film there was a woman speaking, a blonde, her name is Leah Wangbas or something like that. I don't have it right, but this woman was just handily defeated for a state Senate role. If you've heard about that in Texas, I don't mean to get political, but she was really defeated. So that's the good news. The unfortunate news is we had such an uplifting outcome for the Llano Public Library, but some folks in Llano still filed suit to have books removed. And although the Fifth Circuit allowed the books to be removed, still, it went up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court did not hear that. So although the public library is still open, which is great, there were books that were removed and it wasn't considered by the Supreme Court. But we have a great panel here, and I'm going to be interviewing them on a couple of key questions. So here we go. First of all, we have County Librarian Allison McKee, and she began her career with this county library in 2002 as a part-time library assistant. She became a librarian in 2006, working wonderfully at the Juvenile Hall Library. And from 2010 to 2015, she worked as the Senior Community Library Manager for Hercules, Crockett, and Rodeo. She served as a Deputy County Librarian from 2015 until 2020, when she was appointed County Librarian in October 2020. So we're so glad to have you, a homegrown product, leading our county library system. And Natalie, thank you for joining us. Natalie Moore has spent 26 years as a public school teacher. After 23 years as an English and journalism teacher, she made the best professional move of her life to become the Las Lomas school librarian. And what she says is, thanks to those Las Lomas students who are the very best, go reading, go libraries, go Knights. And we're also joined by Kara Sheets, the Collection Development Manager for Contra Costa County Public Library, doing wonderful yeoman's work. And she has worked in public libraries over 20 years and has been with Contra Costa County Public Library since 2016. So just to set a little context, there are some key differences between public and school libraries. You know, public libraries, like our county library, is funded by local governments, run by local governments, and sometimes has administrative boards. But really the focus of the public library is to serve everyone in the community, all ages, all backgrounds, all beliefs. If a book is challenged, there's usually a formal review process, and I hate to say rarely books are banned, but I think oftentimes in public libraries, if a book is controversial, its placement may be changed. Not to say that books aren't banned, but particularly because public libraries are looking at intellectual freedom for the community. They really are very careful in terms of that. Now, school libraries, and they're also funded by the government, run by school district administrators and school boards, their focus is really serving students, and we're going to hear all about that from Natalie. But the books there, the selections and materials are more tied to the school's curriculum or complementing the curriculum. So in some cases, books may be easier to remove. That's not necessarily true, but you saw in the film that school libraries were really the target. I think of this effort more so than public libraries. So it's just a bit of a difference that I wanted to make sure we noticed, particularly with our schools acting in place of parents in loco parentis. And our public libraries are really expect the parents to be the deciders for the wide variety of books and what they would like their children to read. So we know that we have challenges everywhere. We have challenges in Contra Costa County, so we know that this is happening here. So first, I'm going to ask the panel, what challenges have you had in your libraries and how are you dealing with them? So Natalie, I'm going to ask you first. And we're going to spend about 5 minutes on this. I don't want to be a big bad timekeeper, but we're looking, we know everybody at some point has to get home tonight. So Natalie, I know you have a good challenge story to tell us. Not a good one.
I hope, can everyone hear me? Okay. Thank you for having me. Thanks for being here tonight. It's really inspiring to see how many people want to learn about libraries and what we do in school libraries. So I think we feel in the Bay Area that we are quite immune to things like what we saw in the film. And I'm not sure I agree as a school librarian. And in my second year at the Las Lomas Library, we did receive a book challenge, and it was for a book of poetry by Rupi Kaur that is in every single school library in our district. And this challenge came about as a result of a poetry annotated bibliography assignment that I collaborated with an English teacher to create. And the entire English department did this assignment. And this poet was on the list, and it's a poet that students feel very close to, and they see themselves in the poetry of this young woman. And it's it's an interesting collection of poetry. Occasionally there's some drawings in the book of poetry that people can interpret in different ways because reading is about interpretation. And so we did receive a challenge to this text, which came in the form first as an email to me, asking, how do I can't remember the exact phrasing, I'm kind of glad I forgot, but it was something along the lines of, how dare you have a book like this on your shelves? It has pornographic material. Is your intention to peddle this to my child without my consent? And it was very interestingly worded in other ways as well. And so I feel that I live in a very trusted school district, and I trust my administrators. And so I forwarded this directly to my admin, and I said, hello, what should I do? And so they advised me to talk about everything that we do at the library, what our collection development policy is, how this particular assignment came about, the collaboration that I had with the English department on this assignment, the choice that went behind picking out the poetry for this assignment. I was happy to do that. I feel like we're information stewards, so the more information I could give to anyone, the better we are all as a society. And so this email took me about 2 hours to write, and I wanted to make sure all the information was in it to really help this person understand the nature of this book and why it's important, and that this was a choice assignment, and so your child chose this. And if you would like them to make a different choice, let's do it. Here's the other choices. It turns out the kid actually wrote on a completely different poet, which was interesting. And so the parent came back with an even more inflammatory email and copied the entire district office as well as all of my admin at Las Lomas and everyone within the sound of their voice that would be important. And so again, I forwarded it to my administration. What do you think I should do? And at that point, their advice was nothing. And so I said, okay, I can do nothing. It's hard sometimes, but okay. And so from that point, the child would come into the library a lot, and I made sure I know most of the students at Las Lomas, I know them by name, and I know something about them, some class that they're in, because I see classes all day, every day, coming in for different instruction for research and things like that. And so, my relationship with the kid definitely did not change because I kind of thought, does he even know what's happening? And I didn't want to let him know. And so the result of it all was that I was sent an email by our district administration advising me that they were taking care of this. A formal complaint was filed. And everything about book banning, any kind of censorship in our district is done in school board level behind closed doors. And so the first thing I did over the summer, we were out for about a week, and I went back and checked. The book was on the shelf. About 2 weeks later, I was like, I'm just going to pop into the library. I went back and looked, book was on the shelf. And so I kept checking all summer, and by the beginning of fall, book was on the shelf. And so sent an email to the district and said, I appreciate that the book is on the shelf. The answer was, we do too. And that was it. And so, yeah, it was good. It's a good outcome. And so, again, this is just an example of, we do feel, I think, in the Bay Area that we're immune to this. It's happening in San Ramon. It's happening kind of all across our sort of hamlet of what we think is liberal thinking. And so I do want to say that I really relate to what the librarians experienced. I did not experience anything to that level, but definitely being referred to as, pornographer, and then I'm a smut peddler. And it became kind of a joke at school. People were like, oh, you're Las Lomas Larry Flint. And while that's funny, it's also, upsetting that would happen. And these students are still at my school, and I want them to have access to information, and that's what I'm passionate about as a librarian. And so it's very nice to know that my district supports that mission. And so that's kind of what happened. And if we have another book challenge, I do have some trust that our district and our community will support the mission of freedom of information. So that's good.
Thank you, Natalie. Great, Natalie. Now, Allison, Cara, what have you had a challenge recently in Contra Costa Library?
I'll start with paint the broad strokes and then hand it over to Cara. I want to pick up on something that Natalie just said, is that the support of her administration. And you can have policies, but then if the policies aren't followed or honored by your board or your administration, it doesn't matter, just like it happened to the Llano County Public Library. And so I want to start with that, is that we have very strong policies, and we're very supported by our Board of Supervisors. We do occasionally have folks who submit what's called a request for reconsideration. They want us to reconsider whether or not we have the books on our shelves. And I also want to say that those requests for reconsideration that we get run the spectrum, the political spectrum. Sometimes we have very progressive people who want us to remove something from a very conservative point of view, and the opposite. So it's not always one end of the spectrum. What's different from what happens at Las Lomas is our process is not a secret process. It's not secret. It's not a confidential process. When we get a request for reconsideration, it has to be written. We send a letter within 48 hours saying we've received it and we're going to review it and we're going to go through our process. And let me turn it over to Cara to explain our process in detail, because she leads that process.
Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, I have a quiet voice, so if you need me to speak up, let me know. So yes, we have a very formal process, and it's outlined in our collection development plan. And if anyone comes into our libraries and is concerned about a book, what we try to do is handle it right then and there and have a conversation. In my experience, every book ban or attempted complaint or censorship attempt, like Allison is saying, is some variation of, I don't like this book, so no one else should be able to read it either. And that is really kind of what we're trying to stand up against. It's not for us to decide what you should think. It's not for anyone else to decide what you should think. You need access to the information so that you can decide for yourself. And so that's really what we're trying to safeguard. So we try to really get that at the front line in the branch. But if someone's very upset and they want to submit a form, and we have a form, they can do so, and then it comes to us, we respond, we gather a team, we read the book, and we then look at our collection development plan, which explains what we collect, what we don't collect, and why, and how we make the decisions that we make. And then we respond. And it just, a little bit different from Natalie's experience. The first 2 years that I was the collection development manager, we had 11 requests for reconsideration. 11 titles were asked to be removed from the library for a variety of reasons.
And that was 2022, right?
It was kind of over 2022, 2023.
So kind of in the thick of this
Yeah,
moment.
yeah, and we definitely, like the film was talking about, we could tell that it was a coordinated effort. It wasn't just one person with their opinion, there was something else going on. Yeah.
So, Cara or Allison, have you withdrawn a book, or how have you changed the location of a book? Do you have an example of something like that you could share with us?
Yeah. In my experience, I have not facilitated the removal of a book. There was one book that was removed just prior to where I stepped into my role, and it was a very old title on dog obedience, I think it was.
Dog training.
Dog
Yeah.
training, thank
Yeah.
you. And it was removed, but not because of the content, and that's a really important point. The complaint was about the content, but the decision to remove it was sort of, oh, this is really old and in poor condition, and it shouldn't have been in the collection in the first place, right? Because we are constantly removing materials from the library as part of a healthy collection. You bring new stuff in, and so then the old stuff has to go out. But it's never going to be because somebody disagrees with the content.
Natalie, have you had to remove anything or had that experience?
I have not, no. We have sort of I think a different situation in that we weed constantly, and it's a hard process, and it's a painful process to do weeding. I have wonderful TAs that help me a lot with weeding. And so if books are removed, I like to consult with a lot of students if we are weeding. And weeding is a natural process, as you said, to make sure that our content is updated. And so I had some wonderful TAs a couple of years ago who said, Ms. Moore, we feel like our mental health section is really outdated. And some of these books were from the 70s and 80s, and the ones on teen pregnancy and STDs were so outdated. And the wonderful TA said, can we go through these together with you when you have some time, and we can look at them, and we can get the wellness center to help us too. So we went through a process of going through our mental health section and really deciding, what is relevant for students now? What do students need to have now? And if some of these titles aren't relevant or have information that could be harmful, let's make sure that we check it by a bunch of folks, students included, and then we can weed them from the collection and replace them with more contemporary texts that have more updated information. So if something's removed, it's very consciously removed and replaced with things that'll help students look at things from a more modern perspective.
So we heard about some horrible policies and legislation in the film, but I know, Natalie, you've talked about a policy that your board adopted, and there's also some legislation here in California that was adopted to address these challenges. So, Natalie, just tell us a little bit about the Acalanes policy.
Sure. So there is a school board policy that was adopted and revised in 2022 that says that no book shall be removed on basis of race or sex or gender discrimination or sexual orientation. And it says that very explicitly. And as librarians, we really rely on that. And we rely on it as defenders of the First Amendment for our students who are minors. And it's very important to think about our collection reflecting our school culture and our school identity. And in that I feel like our school board policy does help us maintain a collection that reflects our school's identity. And that really is like the purpose of a school library, is to be a reflection of the school's identity, which is what I really relate to in this film, because that's what we're trained to do as teacher librarians. It's like, we're not just librarians, we're teachers too, right? We are in a school and we are teaching how to be with books. And so I do teach a censorship lesson to every freshman at the beginning of the year, where we talk about Fahrenheit 451, because all of our ninth graders read it. And we talk about the differences amongst censorship and book banning and book challenges and book restrictions. And what's the difference amongst those four things? How do they work? You know, if you want to learn more about them, how would you file one if you wanted to? And so our policy protects that kind of instruction, as well as maintaining a collection that reflects the culture of our school, and also maintains the fact that students have a right to read what they want. And we also, you know, are trained in privacy. And so if students want to read a book and their parents don't want them to read a book, they're going to read the book if they come to the library to check the book out. And, you know, that's how it's going. And that, you know, that is also like a really interesting thing that drew me to the profession in the first place, is that protection of the freedom to read and the freedom of information. As an English teacher, has been important to me my whole life. And so this position allows me to do that. And so does our board policy.
Good, thank you. So Allison, did you want to talk a little bit about the Freedom to Read bill?
Yeah, so California does have its very own Freedom to Read bill, and it's very recent. It was adopted, signed into law by the governor in September of 2024. It was sponsored by Assemblymember Murutsuchi from someplace in Southern California, and it basically puts into law exactly what the Acalanes policy is and what most public library policies are, that you cannot remove a book from any public library in California based on its views or for any sexual content.
That's great. I'm glad we have that. I'm watching the clock, and we have one last question that I'm going to ask, and I hope our panel can really kind of share their thoughts about this. So I was very taken in the film when librarians were described as stewards of the people, which is a very positive role, but now really moving into the vanguard of supporting the people. So, and the people's access to knowledge. So it really seems like, although it's always been like this, but it seems like librarian jobs are getting really political. But I thought we had this mantle of neutrality that we were supposed to maintain. So what do you all think about that? Yeah. You want to start, Allison, Cara? Go ahead.
We just go down the line.
Yeah,
well, I was doing a little bit of homework for tonight, and in the movie, you probably, I don't know if you remember seeing one of the school librarians standing up next to a placard that said the American Library Association Bill of Rights. And so in the little bit of research I was doing for tonight, I looked at that Bill of Rights, and it was created by the American Library Association. I think it was 1936, and it was created in reaction to all of the fascist movements that were happening in Europe at the time. So that's not neutral, right? That's a very strong stance. And of course, it just depends on what you mean by neutral. Personally, I think it's impossible to be neutral. We have to make judgment calls all the time. And really our job in public libraries, similar to what Natalie was saying about school libraries, is to really have our collections represent the diversity of the community. Everybody should see themselves. And I don't know who said it, but everybody should be offended by something in the library too.
I love that. That's wonderful. Yeah, I'm at the very tail end of a very long 2 weeks of delivering some AI curriculum to every student at Las Lomas High School. And so we've just, I'm sorry. Is my mic not working? Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. And so we have a new AI sort of policy and rollout procedure, and we have a few AI tools that have just been turned on in our students' Google Suites. And so part of my job is to teach students about how to use these tools responsibly and ethically. And it's a huge responsibility that all humanity has right now with AI, is how I feel. And AI is about information, right? And so part of the way that I teach about this is asking the students what's the difference between information and knowledge. So we take information and we use it to make knowledge. We've always done that. Human beings are compelled to do that. That's how our brains work. And so I think that the idea of, being apolitical about taking information and making it into knowledge is a big challenge. However, we provide information, and it's not my job to tell you what information to find. It is my job to help guide knowledge, because I'm a teacher. And so, the information that our students are getting right now, and the amount of it, and the quality of it, questionable quality of it sometimes, is alarming. And so I think that the idea of librarians being vanguards is really important to think about right now, especially if I can speak at the school level. We are teaching students how to take information and make knowledge, but the information is really difficult to navigate. It's bigger than a book. It's bigger than a library of books. It's gigantic. And so how to do that, I think, is the challenge, and I feel really honored to take that on in this job. And I don't think apolitical exists because information makes knowledge, and knowledge makes you feel political. So I think that's kind of how I see it from my perspective as a school librarian. So.
Cara, I think you have a very articulate view on this topic, so I'd love to hear from you as our closer.
No pressure.
No pressure, no pressure.
Well, the best way that I've found to address this question of are libraries neutral is that no, we're not neutral, and that's because we have values. And the cornerstone value in our profession is intellectual freedom. It's providing access to information, and it's allowing people to learn how to think and not telling them what to think. And privacy is a really big part of that as well. If someone comes up and asks for something, it is none of my business why, nor is it what they're going to do with it. My job is to make sure they have the access. And it ends there.
All right. Well, as Cara had said in another conversation, intellectual freedom is our North Star. The topic doesn't really matter, but we want to make sure our organizations and our libraries are providing that access to information that is our true core value. So I hope you would thank our panel. I know we'll stay around for a little while if you want to talk to us. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you so much to the panel for being here tonight and sharing your insights and your experience with us. For those who could not be here tonight with us, I wanted to share with you that The Librarians is going to be shown on PBS's Independent Lens on Monday, February 9th. So you can watch it again or tell your friends to look for it. So please pass that on. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the recorded panel discussion that you just heard will be on our website and on Walnut Creek TV at some point in the next few days. And then the last thing I wanted to leave you with, one of the key takeaways, at least for me from tonight, is that we cannot take our libraries or our librarians for granted. They need our support. They need it every single day. The Walnut Creek Library Foundation has a proven track record of successful support for our libraries in terms of sponsoring programs, purchasing new equipment and furniture, and funding books and ebooks and movies and music and many other library resources. And we do that for everyone for free. We invite you to join us and become a donor. So with that, thank you again for being here tonight, and good night.